In this lesson, I want to cover how to use indexed arrays to start making web pages, as well as go over a generic formatting for grids using utility classes. As we study arrays this week, we'll have a little section on each type of array. So this section is going to be on indexed arrays. Before we start, I just want to point out a few things, is that our pages now, just to go back and talk about how we're thinking about pages, we need to think of them in three explicit parts. The first step is to initialize the page. Now these slashes here are relative to the current directory. So since I'm way far super deep in my directory structure in public, I'm in class, then I'm in week 4, and then lesson 1, I have to go up a lot of directories to find advanced web dev and then come back down to the includes folder. Now the reason I'm bringing that up is because this is different depending on what page you're visiting on your website. So if I go to my home page over here, you see there's not as many dots. This only has to go from public up to advanced web dev and then back down to includes. Once these are set up, all your other includes work fine because they're based on variables that were set in this init file. Once the page is initialized, then we can go ahead and set or get any data. In this case, we're going to grab the page name and create that for the header. We're going to grab the page description too and create that for the header as well. And then I'm going to add a new variable this week for products. And this is an indexed array. It's a simple array of just simple values like a list. Then down below, the third section is the template where we include the header and the footer, and we're going to put a whole bunch of information in the middle. One thing I start doing in here right away is I put a class called container. And if you want to debug, I put debugging on in this section as well. That way I don't debug the whole document, I just debug this section. So if I type in my page here, a lot, and hit save, you'll see it bumps up against the edge. But my container has a little bit of padding around it, so it gives some breathing room on my pages. Up above, we have a variable for products that includes that array. So when I use products down here, inside of that container, let's create a little PHP block and see if we can get some things to happen. Now up above, the name of our array was products. So let's see what happens when we try to echo out products. We get a warning. Echoing is for strings or numbers or simple data types. An array is not a simple data type, so it won't respond to echo. Instead, we need to kind of check it out using var dump first to see what the variable is and what it contains. So with var dump in there, now we get some output, and we can see the first part of this entire mess here is that it is an array, and the array has 24 entries. Now if I come up here into my array and I go ahead and take some out and hit save, you'll see it drops down to 13. So just by adjusting the array, we can see that we're connected to it and it's working on the page. Once we know we have an array, we can do array type things with it. In this case, we can do something called print r, which is a new built-in function we're going to look at this week for arrays. And this is going to print out the array value only, but it's kind of a mess. So to help us out with this, and before this PHP block, we're going to put a little HTML tag called pre. And this is for pre-formatting and preserving. So what it's going to do is it's going to preserve the white space in the output and show us what it looks like formatted. Here we can see that indexed array, and we can see that each value has an index associated with it. Notice in PHP, numbering starts with 0 and not with 1. This is important. So your first array value is actually index 0. And again, if I come back up and just take some of these out, you can see that it does drop down, and now we only have 10 entries in that array. So let's say we don't want to print out the whole thing. Let's say we want to get one value. I want to get the first item of the array. So what I can do, instead of say print r, we can put an echo statement in here. But instead of trying to print the array, we could print the index. So we're going to use brackets just like it says right here, and we're going to grab number 0. And if this echoes products number 0, or the first array item, I'm expecting to see wood-fired stoneware mug show up on the page now. And it does. If I change this to 1, which is the second entry, you can see that the title changes on the page as well. So we can grab individual values from our array if we know what the index is. One thing I'm going to have to do from this point forward is we're going to have to check the value of the arrays like this quite a bit. And I really don't want to type all this code every single time I want to check the value of an array. So what I've done is I created a helper function, and that's a great reason to create a helper function. If you want to do all this stuff, but you don't want to type it every time, we can open up a helper function. So I'm going to create a little function in here called print pre. I've got it in the same file that we put the e function in, we're going to use in a minute, and then the price function as well. And now I've got print pre, which takes in an array, and right on the spot it doesn't return anything, it just immediately prints the pre tags, runs print r on the array, and then echoes out the end pre tag, so it formats it automatically. One challenge we have with functions is, what if the wrong information is passed in the function, or the wrong data type, or nothing is passed in, or it's blank? So let's take a look at a few instances where I fixed this in my code. For the function e, I set raw data equal to empty by default. What this does is it defaults to an empty string if nothing is passed in. That way we don't get an error or some sort of data type or value like null that we don't expect. We always get back a string even if it's empty. For an array, of course, it's not quite that simple. Arrays require a more complicated structure. So if we send in a string and it's blank, you might think, well, we could just add, let's set the array to be a blank array. That covers it. But in this case, it won't. So instead, we're going to insert some logic here. And we'll get to logic in a little bit, but let's just see what it might look like. We're going to say if something is true or not. Okay, what do we want to be true or false? We're going to test something. We're going to use a function isArray, which is going to say, if this really is an array, then use it. And in the first part of the if statement, this is what's going to happen in here if this statement becomes true. Okay, or we can say else, which means this is going to happen if that statement is false. So with true, we don't want anything to happen. We just want the array to be the array. If an array was passed in, then let's use that array. Otherwise, let's set array to blank. We'll create an empty array to be returned. Okay, an easy way to say this would be, instead of testing for true, is to test for false. And we could do this by putting an exclamation point first. And we'll get to all this later on. We'll spend a whole week on logic. Okay, this assumes it's false. If this is not an array, is now how you read that, then create a blank array. So back in my code here, all we have to do now is just say, instead of print r, we can get rid of the pre tags, and we can say print pre instead, because we just made that function up. And now this code becomes much easier to use to quickly see the value of an array. Once you've double checked that this is an array and you've verified that the data is accurate, correct, and looks the way you expect it to, now we can start using the array in different ways. So one way we can grab something from the array is, notice that each entry in the array has an index. Now that I'm getting down to the wire here, now that we're getting towards the point where I feel like this output is starting to be solid or stable, I'm going to start adding security in. Up until now, we've been just debugging, and that's fine. But I do want to just remind us that we should be escaping that output every single time we output something to the screen. It becomes much more important when we start gathering data from users or pulling in data from files, APIs, or databases. Another way to see the values of an array, now that we know it's an array, is to loop through the array. So remember, this is like a list. So it's just like going through your grocery list and saying, I need milk, I need bread, I need cheese. Okay, we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to create a for each loop here. Now the for each loop is going to have a colon at the end. We're going to do this a little bit differently than you might see in online, and we're going to say end for each. This is just much easier, I think, to keep track of. So if I have something like this, an opening bracket instead, you can see that if I put the bracket down here, it's not really clear. If this is way down in my code, it's not really clear what that bracket goes to. And you can leave a comment. You can say end for each, which is what I usually do. Okay, or you can use this PHP notation that says just end for each. Instead of using the bracket, and then up here, instead of using that bracket, you use a colon like this. And for each, we're going to say products. So the first part of this argument is the collection or the array. But we don't want to print out the array. We can't do that. We need to print out each part of the array. So what we say is as, and then make up a variable. And usually I use the singular version. Notice my arrays is plural because there's many things in it. So now I'm referring to the product. Okay. We'll bring this back up, make it neater, and we can end our PHP. Come down here and put another block, and that way we can go right back to typing HTML. Okay, and then inside of this block, we could put something like, for instance, a div, and then as output, we can print to the screen using shorthand, or you could use echo here. It's totally up to you. Okay, but just echo out the product. And that's pretty much what you need to know mostly about arrays and particularly indexed arrays. Before moving on to multi-dimensional arrays, let's explore how to create a grid system using CSS utility classes.